Imagine this. Your little girl, your world, can't hear the doorbell. She's smiling, innocent, unaware of the danger that's about to strike. And then it happens. A shot rings out. Your heart stops. Time freezes. You watch in horror as your daughter collapses, not because she did anything wrong, but because someone who was supposed to live by rules, by civility, decided her life didn't matter. Yes, I'm talking about the HOA Karen who pulled the trigger just because your child couldn't respond in time. It's unthinkable. It's terrifying. And tonight, I'm going to take you inside this story, the fear, the shock, the betrayal, and the shocking twists that follow. Before we dive into this, I want to know, which city are you watching from? Comment your city below. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, because this story is one you won't forget. Life in our quiet suburban neighborhood always seemed perfect. Manicured lawns, smiling neighbors, and the kind of peace you read about in magazines. But beneath that calm, behind every white picket fence, there were secrets nobody talked about. Secrets that could explode in ways no one expected. And for one family, my family, that explosion came one ordinary afternoon. My daughter, Lily, was 6 years old. She was deaf, but her laughter was the kind that filled a room, her curiosity endless, and her innocence untouchable. Every day, she greeted life with wonder, learning to communicate with the world in her own beautiful way. But that day, everything changed. It started with something small, a knock at the door. But Lily, like she always did, didn't hear it. And that's when the unimaginable happened. An HOA member, someone entrusted with rules and oversight, lost all control, and in a fraction of a second, our world shattered. Before we go any further, I want to connect with you, the viewers. Where are you watching from? Comment your city below. I want to know where my story is reaching. And while you do that, make sure you subscribe to the channel. You'll want to stick around because what happened next isn't just shocking, it's a roller coaster of fear, betrayal, and twists that no one saw coming. This story is not just about one tragic act. It's about courage, justice, and the lengths a parent will go to protect their child. And it starts right here, right now, with the moment our lives were changed forever. The morning had started like any other in our quiet suburban neighborhood. Birds chirped, sprinklers hissed across freshly cut lawns, and kids laughed as they ran down the sidewalks. But for me, that day held an ominous undertone I couldn't quite place. Something in the air felt off, a tension that even Lily seemed to sense. She was unusually quiet that morning, sitting by the window and tapping her fingers against the glass, watching the world she couldn't fully hear. Lily's deafness had always been a challenge, yes, but also a source of incredible resilience. She had her own little routines, her own ways of communicating. I had grown accustomed to her signals, her gestures, her radiant smile that spoke more than words ever could. But that morning, even her usual joy seemed muted, almost as if she were anticipating something she couldn't understand. I was in the kitchen, making breakfast, when I heard a distant but sharp knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat, not because of the knock itself, but because I knew Lily wouldn't hear it. And in that instant, a cold wave of fear rushed over me. I called out her name, waving frantically, but she was engrossed in her drawing, unaware of the world around her. The door creaked open, and I saw her, Karen, the HOA president. The woman everyone called perfect and polite had a smile on her face, but there was something unnatural in it, something cold. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the house as if she owned every inch of it. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Karen wasn't just visiting to talk about neighborhood regulations. I could feel it. "Good morning," she said sweetly, stepping inside. Her tone was friendly, but her presence was suffocating. I tried to maintain my composure, guiding her toward the living room. "Can I help you with something?" I asked cautiously, trying to read her intentions. Karen's smile widened, almost predatorily. "Oh, I just wanted to discuss a little matter," she said, tilting her head toward Lily. That's when my stomach dropped. She was looking at my daughter, my beautiful, innocent little girl. And in that look, there was something I couldn't quite name, a warning, a threat, something darker than anything I had imagined. I moved to position myself between them instinctively. She's a child. She's just drawing, I said firmly, trying to maintain control of the situation. Karen didn't respond immediately. She just stood there, quiet, watching. My pulse pounded. Something about this woman's calmness screamed danger. And then, without warning, she reached into her bag. My mind froze. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not in my home. But before I could react, before I could shield Lily, she pulled out a gun. My daughter, my sweet little girl, had no idea. She didn't hear the metallic click, the sound of intent that no parent ever wants to hear. Time slowed. I screamed, lunging forward, but Karen was faster. A single shot rang out. My ears rang with the echo. My heart stopped, and for a moment, the world seemed to dissolve into chaos. Lily fell to the ground, her little body trembling, and I, paralyzed with shock, could only stare at the horror before me. Neighbors would later say they heard the shot, saw me screaming, saw Karen standing there with that icy, unreadable expression. But in that moment, there was no time for words, no time for reasoning. The world had narrowed to one terrifying truth. My daughter had been shot, and all because she couldn't hear the door. The seconds dragged like hours. I rushed to her side, my hands trembling as I checked her. Lily, stay with me. I shouted, tears blurring my vision. She looked up at me, her eyes wide, confused, scared, but miraculously she was alive. The bullet hadn't hit a vital area, but it had grazed her arm. Pain etched her face, and I felt a rage unlike anything I'd ever known. Karen, meanwhile, had already begun backing toward the door, almost as if nothing had happened. Calm, collected, as if shooting a child was a routine matter she could simply erase from memory. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, dialing 911 with every ounce of fury I had. The operator's voice was calm, professional, but I could barely hear over the storm of panic and rage inside me. While we waited for help, I tried to make sense of what had just happened. Why? Why would someone who represented the community, do this? What kind of person sees a 6-year-old child defenseless and decides that fear, control, or twisted power is worth more than a human life? Questions swirled. But there were no answers, only the sound of Lily's shaky breaths and the distant wail of sirens approaching. When the paramedics arrived, they moved quickly, checking her wound and securing her in the ambulance. I insisted on staying by her side, my hands gripping hers, my heart breaking and burning simultaneously. Outside, Karen had vanished. She was gone before the authorities could even process what had happened. And that perhaps was the cruelest part. She had left, leaving behind fear, chaos, and a parent's unbearable guilt for not protecting their child fast enough. But even as we drove to the hospital, even as doctors worked to stabilize Lily, my mind was already racing. This wasn't just an attack on my daughter, it was an attack on every sense of safety I had ever known. And I knew one thing with terrifying clarity: this story wasn't over. Karen's actions, her audacity, her complete disregard for human life, it would have consequences. And I was going to uncover every single one of them. The ambulance sirens faded behind us, but the panic inside me only grew louder. I gripped Lily's hand, feeling her tiny fingers tremble against mine. Every shallow breath she took made my chest tighten with a mix of fear, guilt, and rage. How could someone who was supposed to protect the neighborhood, who was supposed to maintain order, have crossed the line into pure terror? The hospital smelled of antiseptic and anxiety. Nurses moved quickly, efficiently, yet their calmness couldn't reach the storm that had taken over me. Doctors examined Lily, running tests, applying bandages, and keeping a constant watch on her vitals. The bullet had missed her main artery, but the trauma, both physical and emotional, was severe. She didn't cry much, she couldn't hear the world's reassurances, but her eyes spoke volumes. Confusion, fear, and hurt. While the doctors worked, I was on my phone contacting friends and neighbors. Some were in shock, some were furious, and some couldn't believe what had happened. I posted a brief message in our neighborhood group. Lily was hurt by someone at home. Please stay vigilant. Responses poured in, expressions of disbelief, panic, and anger. The name Karen began surfacing repeatedly. People remembered her odd behavior, her obsession with rules, her insistence on controlling even the smallest details. But nobody expected her to do this. The police arrived at the hospital, questioning me while I tried to stay composed for Lily. Every word I spoke was laced with terror. She just walked in. I didn't even see her come in with a gun. It all happened so fast. I stammered. The officers nodded, scribbling notes, eyes sympathetic yet guarded. Do you have any reason to believe she targeted Lily specifically? One asked. I shook my head violently. I don't know, she's the HOA president. Maybe she wanted to intimidate us. Maybe she just snapped. I don't understand. Outside, the neighborhood was buzzing. Rumors spread faster than wildfire. People whispered behind closed doors, eyes darting nervously toward our house. Some were afraid of Karen, others were angry at the HOA system itself. One thing was clear, everyone felt unsafe now. That same woman who smiled politely at community events had shown a side no one wanted to see, and it had turned deadly. At home, the damage went beyond the physical. Our living room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a crime scene. Police tape would have made more sense than the cheerful furniture arrangement. Lily's drawings lay scattered on the floor, some soaked with tears she hadn't shed, some smudged with panic. Every corner of the house reminded me of what had happened, what Karen had done, and every memory made my pulse race. I began thinking about motive. Was this really just a freak act of aggression or something deeper? Karen had always been obsessive about the rules, too obsessive, in my opinion. She controlled parking spots, trimmed hedges without permission, dictated lawn schedules, and even monitored how neighbors interacted. But violence? This was beyond anything imaginable. The police told me they would investigate thoroughly, but I felt a creeping unease. Karen wasn't just a rule-obsessed neighbor. She had connections in the community, influence in the HOA board, and a network of supporters who probably wouldn't believe any accusation against her. What if she covered her tracks? What if justice was as elusive as our sense of safety? That night, I stayed in the hospital, refusing to leave Lily's side. I held her hand, whispered reassurances, and prayed she could somehow understand. Even though she couldn't hear me, I hoped my presence comforted her. My mind, however, raced with questions, and the fear of what Karen might do next gnawed at me. Could she come back? Could she hurt us again? The next morning, the news had started spreading online. Social media exploded with headlines that didn't mention Lily's deafness but sensationalized the incident. Suburban horror. HOA president opens fire in home, read one. Shocking neighborhood shooting. Child injured, read another. Comments ranged from outrage to disbelief. People demanded justice. Yet somewhere between the chaos of the internet and the slow wheels of law enforcement, I felt powerless. Neighbors began checking in, but the atmosphere remained tense. Doors stayed locked, dogs barked incessantly, and even casual glances from familiar faces carried suspicion. Everyone was waiting for Karen's next move, waiting for the police to act, waiting for the unimaginable to repeat itself. I began documenting everything, her interactions, her communications, her past threats, no matter how small. Every detail mattered. Every sign could be a clue to protect Lily and prevent another tragedy. Then, the first twist came. While reviewing security footage from our doorbell camera, I noticed something horrifying. Karen didn't just walk in impulsively, she had been lurking outside our house for nearly 30 minutes before the shot. She observed Lily, studied her routine, and timed her attack. This wasn't random, it was premeditated, and the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. She had been planning this, and who knows for how long. From that moment, fear became a constant companion. Every knock, every rustle, every unexpected sound triggered panic. But it also ignited something deeper, inside me, determination. Karen had crossed a line that no one should ever cross. She had targeted my daughter because of her vulnerability, and I knew I couldn't let her get away with it. I couldn't rely on others. I had to act to protect, to expose her. Little did I know, this was only the beginning. Karen's obsession with control, her hidden connections, and the dark secrets she carried would soon unravel a chain of events even more shocking than the shooting itself. The neighborhood that seemed quiet and ordinary had layers of deception, fear, and danger that nobody could have imagined. And as I sat by Lily's hospital bed, watching her sleep with her tiny arm bandaged, I made a silent promise. I would uncover the truth. No matter the cost, no matter how dangerous. Karen had underestimated me. She had underestimated the fierce, unstoppable force that is a parent's love. The first step had been surviving her attack. The next would be uncovering the horrifying reality behind her actions and preparing for the twists that would shake our neighborhood to its core. The days following the shooting were a blur. Lily was recovering slowly, her tiny body healing. But the emotional scars ran deep. Every glance she gave me reminded me of what had almost been lost. Every shadow in the house made me jump, and every time I thought we were safe, a single detail reminded me we were not. While I stayed by Lily's side at the hospital, I began compiling evidence. I downloaded the doorbell camera footage repeatedly, watching Karen's calculated approach again and again. She wasn't just lurking, she had been studying our patterns for weeks. Every morning, every little routine, every habit she could exploit, she knew it all. The more I watched, the more I realized that this wasn't just a one-time act of rage. It was a meticulously planned attack. I decided it was time to talk to the neighbors. Some were supportive, horrified at what had happened. But others were defensive, almost protective of Karen. One neighbor whispered, "You know, Karen's had issues before, she's different." But no one thought she'd go that far. Another said, "Be careful. She has friends on the HOA board." Even now, I could feel the tension, an invisible barrier between me and the truth built from fear, loyalty, or simple denial. Determined to dig deeper, I reached out to former HOA members and neighbors who had left the area. Stories started to emerge. Karen's obsession with control wasn't new. She had forced families to repaint homes, dictated lawn heights, and even reported people to city officials over trivial infractions. One former member revealed something chilling. "She once told me she couldn't stand weakness. She's always looking for people who won't obey her rules. She believes it's her right to enforce punishment." My stomach turned. Was my daughter just the latest target of her twisted sense of justice? Then a breakthrough came. While reviewing messages she had sent to neighbors, I discovered a series of emails and texts filled with veiled threats. Some were cryptic, like, "Rules exist for a reason. Those who ignore them will face consequences." Others were more direct, mentioning names of people she believed were incompetent or unfit. My blood ran cold. Lily's innocence had crossed her line, and to Karen, that had made her incompetent. I contacted the police with this new evidence, hoping they would finally see the full picture. The officer I spoke to nodded gravely, saying, "This is more than just a reckless act. It's harassment, stalking, and a potential ongoing threat. We'll start digging deeper." Relief washed over me, but it was tempered with fear. Karen had power, connections, and a reputation in the neighborhood. She could disappear, manipulate, or even escalate again. Late one night, while researching Karen's background, I discovered something that made my blood run ice cold. Karen had a history, hidden from most neighbors, of violent behavior. There were reports in distant towns where she had threatened families, made alarming claims about enforcing justice, and even brandished weapons. Nothing had resulted in arrests, but the pattern was unmistakable. She wasn't just dangerous, she was a ticking time bomb. I realized then that surviving the initial attack was only the beginning. Karen's obsession, her ability to manipulate authority, and her complete lack of empathy meant she could strike again, anytime, anywhere. And she might escalate if she sensed weakness or defiance. That's when I made a decision. I needed to document everything, prepare for every possible scenario, and arm myself with proof. I began recording interactions with neighbors who knew her, saving every message, screenshotting every threatening text, and noting every suspicious detail. I wasn't going to wait for the next attack. I was going to expose her, and I was going to protect Lily at all costs. But just as I thought I was gaining control, another twist hit. One afternoon, while checking our neighborhood camera feeds, I saw Karen at our property line. She wasn't approaching the house this time. She was walking along the edge of our lawn, scanning, watching, calculating. Her smile was the same cold, eerie grin from the day of the shooting. And then she disappeared, just as suddenly as she had arrived. My heart raced. She wasn't done. She was still monitoring us, still plotting. Every day, the invisible threat hung over us, a shadow that refused to vanish. I couldn't sleep, couldn't relax, couldn't let my guard down, even for a second. The woman who had shot my child wasn't just dangerous, she was relentless. At the same time, I began noticing subtle signs of manipulation in the neighborhood. Some neighbors acted nervous when I spoke about Karen, as if they feared her retaliation. Others whispered warnings. Don't push too hard, she has connections. The realization was terrifying. The very community that was supposed to be our safety net had become a web of fear, and Karen was at its center. Determined not to be intimidated, I contacted a private investigator. I needed someone who could track her movements, dig into her past, and expose any hidden threat. Within days, the investigator uncovered even more alarming details. Karen had multiple addresses, had purchased weapons under aliases, and had a network of supporters ready to protect her from scrutiny. She wasn't just a rogue neighbor, she was a carefully calculated danger, moving in shadows and manipulating appearances. The investigator also discovered something even more shocking. Karen had a history of targeting children in her previous neighborhoods. In one town, she had threatened a child who had disobeyed minor rules, and in another she had tried to intimidate a family into moving. Each time, she had avoided legal consequences by presenting herself as reasonable and caring. And now, she had escalated to actual violence, shooting Lily. Every piece of information felt like another puzzle piece falling into place, but also another blow to my sense of safety. Karen wasn't just dangerous, she was methodical, calculating, and capable of escalation. She had learned to manipulate appearances, avoid suspicion, and strike without warning. And the terrifying truth was clear. If we weren't prepared, she could, and likely would, strike again. That night, as I watched Lily sleep peacefully, I whispered a vow. You will be safe, Lily. No matter what it takes. Fear still gripped me, but it was tempered with determination. Karen had underestimated me, underestimated my love and vigilance. And I would prove that no matter how clever or dangerous she was, she couldn't control us. She couldn't win. The nightmare had started with a single horrifying shot. But now it was clear. This was only the beginning. Karen's secrets, her obsession, and her dangerous past were about to collide with the one thing she hadn't counted on: my determination to fight, protect, and uncover the truth. And the twists were far from over. The days blurred together as the tension in our neighborhood thickened. Every morning, I checked the cameras obsessively. Every evening, I double-checked locks, alarms, and even the perimeter of our yard. But despite all precautions, an underlying dread never left me. Karen was still out there, still watching, still plotting. One afternoon, I received an anonymous tip. A neighbor, someone I had never spoken to before, left a note under my door. She's planning something bigger. Don't wait for it to happen. Find the proof. My pulse raced. Finally, someone else had noticed. Finally, I wasn't alone in seeing the darkness behind Karen's polite facade. Determined to act, I arranged a meeting with the private investigator. We pored over the data we had collected: messages, camera footage, patterns of behavior, and Karen's hidden past. Each detail painted a terrifying picture. Karen had been escalating for years, her obsession with control turning into calculated violence. She didn't strike randomly. She studied her victims, chose her moments, and struck when they were most vulnerable. And now she had chosen Lily. Armed with this knowledge, I knew we couldn't wait for the police to catch her. Karen's network and her ability to manipulate appearances meant she could evade legal consequences. If we wanted to protect Lily and potentially others, I had to confront Karen directly. The plan was risky, but I felt there was no other choice. With the investigators' help, I traced Karen's patterns and predicted where she might strike next. We set up a controlled confrontation, ensuring that everything was documented. Cameras were positioned strategically, neighbors discreetly alerted, and local authorities kept on standby, ready to intervene if things went wrong. The day arrived. I approached Karen's house, heart pounding like a drum. Every step felt heavier, each breath tighter, but I knew I couldn't back down. I rang her doorbell. She answered immediately, the same eerie, calculated smile plastered on her face. "Hello," she said, her voice sweet but chilling. "I wasn't expecting you." I held the camera steady, documenting everything. "Karen," I said, keeping my voice calm but firm, "we need to talk about what you did to Lily. About what you've been planning." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a crack in her otherwise impenetrable demeanor. "Planning? I don't know what you mean," she replied, feigning innocence. But her eyes betrayed her. Sharp, calculating, cold. She knew exactly what I meant. "I have proof, Karen," I said, holding up my phone with screenshots, messages, and footage. "We know everything. The stalking, the threats, the planning. You need to come clean, now, before this escalates further." She laughed, soft but menacing, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "You think you've won? Do you really think a few photos and texts can stop me?" she said. "I've survived worse. You're only scratching the surface." That's when the twist hit, something I hadn't expected. Karen stepped aside and motioned toward the backyard. I followed cautiously, the camera capturing every detail. There, hidden among the trees, was a stash of weapons, carefully organized, some loaded. I could hardly believe my eyes. She had been preparing for something much bigger than an isolated attack. Her obsession had escalated far beyond what I had imagined. The realization hit me like a punch. Karen had been planning multiple acts of violence. Lily's shooting had been just the beginning. The thought made my stomach turn. How close had we come to a tragedy far worse than a single bullet? How many others had unknowingly been in her crosshairs? Karen noticed my shock and smiled wider. "You see, it's never just one. Those who disobey me, those who show weakness, they all get consequences," she said, her voice eerily calm. "I maintain order. Someone has to." Rage and fear surged through me. This wasn't just a crime, it was ideology twisted into violence. She truly believed she was justified. But I couldn't let her continue. Not for Lily. Not for anyone. The private investigator, who had been observing discreetly from a safe distance, radioed the police to move in. Karen's attention shifted as she realized we weren't alone. Her eyes darted nervously, but she quickly regained composure. "You'll never stop me. People like you always fail," she hissed. Then, the final twist of this confrontation occurred. As police sirens approached, Karen made a desperate move. She attempted to flee through a hidden gate at the back of her property. But it was too late. Officers moved in swiftly, and she was apprehended before she could escape. The relief was overwhelming, yet the danger of her planning lingered. The stash of weapons alone confirmed she had intended more harm. In the aftermath, as authorities took Karen away, I finally felt a sense of relief, but it was tempered by lingering fear and the realization of how close we had come to complete disaster. The neighborhood that had once felt safe now knew the depths of Karen's obsession. The quiet suburban streets had been hiding darkness beneath their manicured lawns. Sitting with Lily later that evening, watching her play quietly, I realized how fragile safety can be. One person's obsession can disrupt countless lives, and sometimes the line between ordinary and catastrophic is terrifyingly thin. But the confrontation had shown something else, too. Courage, vigilance, and preparation could prevent tragedy. And sometimes the fiercest battles are fought not with weapons, but with knowledge, strategy, and relentless determination. Karen had been stopped for now. But the truth she revealed about control, obsession, and hidden danger would linger. A chilling reminder that darkness can exist behind the most innocent smiles. And for me, as a parent, that day had redefined the meaning of vigilance, courage, and love. I would never let Lily face such danger alone again. Even after Karen was arrested, the feeling of unease didn't leave me. Her calm, calculating smile haunted my thoughts, and every time I looked at Lily, I wondered how much danger we had really been in. The police assured me she was in custody, but something deep inside told me this wasn't over. Karen's obsession didn't stop at one attack. It extended further into secrets, connections, and a network of people I didn't yet understand. The investigation intensified over the next few days. Detectives combed through Karen's property, uncovering evidence that shocked even the most seasoned officers. Hidden documents, detailed neighborhood maps, and coded journals revealed that Karen had been meticulously planning her acts for years. It wasn't just about controlling the HOA or punishing one child. She had identified weaknesses in families across multiple neighborhoods and had marked potential targets. I learned about families who had moved away suddenly, neighbors who claimed harassment, and others who lived in fear but never spoke out. Karen had been operating under a mask of civility, hiding her obsession behind polite smiles and community involvement. The depth of her planning, the consistency of her methods, was staggering. Then came the next twist. The detective in charge called me into the station, a grim expression on his face. "We've found evidence that she wasn't acting alone," he said. My heart skipped a beat. I had assumed Karen's obsession was isolated, personal. But the truth was far more terrifying. She had allies, people who shared her ideology of control, her need to enforce order at any cost. These allies weren't obvious. They were silent supporters, neighbors who had helped her monitor families, report on small infractions, and even provide alibis for suspicious behavior. One journal entry found in her home detailed meetings, contacts, and a network of people she trusted to maintain her influence. Each page read like a blueprint for domination, a twisted roadmap of fear and control. I felt a wave of panic. The problem wasn't just Karen, it was the system she had quietly built. The HOA, meant to protect residents, had become a tool for manipulation, and some neighbors had willingly or unknowingly supported her. The realization that we were surrounded by hidden threats left me feeling exposed, vulnerable, and furious. But as terrifying as this was, I knew I had to act. I couldn't just wait for the authorities to unravel this web. I began contacting neighbors directly, quietly asking questions, piecing together who might be involved. Some were shocked, some defensive, but a few were terrified themselves, willing to speak the truth once they realized the danger Karen had created. Another shocking revelation emerged when detectives found a secondary set of plans, one that specifically targeted Lily again. It seemed that Karen had anticipated a failure the first time and had prepared a backup plan to strike when no one expected it. My stomach turned. She had marked our family, tracked our routines, and her obsession had escalated beyond reason. I realized then that vigilance wasn't enough. I needed to expose every detail, every hidden connection, to ensure Karen and her network could never harm anyone again. With the help of law enforcement, we began compiling evidence, connecting dots, and identifying potential accomplices. Each discovery was worse than the last. Friends of Karen, seemingly normal families, had been complicit in her surveillance and harassment. As I processed all this, I found myself questioning everything about our neighborhood. The friendly waves, the polite conversations, the smiling faces, they had been masking fear, compliance, and in some cases complicity. The facade of safety had been an illusion, and Karen had been the puppet master, pulling strings from the shadows. Yet amidst the fear, I also found determination. This was no longer just about protecting Lily. It was about reclaiming our community, exposing the darkness, and ensuring that no other family would experience the terror we had endured. Each day, I worked with investigators, providing statements, documenting events, and preparing for the legal battle that was inevitable. And then came the final twist of this section. While reviewing Karen's digital footprint, investigators discovered encrypted messages hinting at future plans, even from jail. She had left instructions for her allies, contingency plans in case she was removed. It was proof that her obsession wasn't ending. It had evolved into a movement. The realization hit hard. This was far from over, and the threat was not just physical, it was psychological, manipulative, and deeply rooted. I felt fear, yes, but also a surge of resolve. Karen had underestimated the lengths I would go to protect Lily and our neighborhood. Her network was dangerous, but we had evidence, we had truth, and we had the will to fight back. Every hidden plan uncovered, every ally exposed, brought us one step closer to safety. That night, as I tucked Lily into bed, I whispered softly, "We're going to be okay, sweetheart. I promise." She smiled, a quiet, innocent expression, unaware of the battles being fought in the shadows. But I knew that the fight wasn't just for today, it was for tomorrow and every day after. Karen's web had been vast, her obsession deep, but love, vigilance, and courage were stronger. Section 5 ends with a sense of triumph tinged with danger. The enemy is partially exposed, but hidden threats remain. The story is now building toward a final, shocking revelation in Section 6 that will leave the audience breathless. Even after exposing Karen's network and uncovering her sinister plans, the tension in our neighborhood lingered like a shadow. Every day brought new anxiety, reminders of the danger that had invaded our lives. Yet, I knew one thing clearly. The story wasn't over until justice was fully served, and until Karen's obsession and those who aided her were neutralized. The police, armed with the evidence we had collected, began a comprehensive crackdown. Karen's allies were identified, questioned, and in some cases arrested for complicity. What shocked me most was how many neighbors had quietly supported her, out of fear, agreement, or self-interest. It was a chilling reminder that evil doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it hides behind familiar faces, polite smiles, and seemingly ordinary lives. Meanwhile, Lily's recovery continued. Her courage amazed me every day. Despite the trauma, she laughed again, drew her favorite cartoons, and navigated the world in her own way. She had survived a direct attack, and yet in her innocence she had already begun to heal. Watching her, I realized that the fight wasn't just about vengeance, it was about protection, love, and reclaiming our lives. Then came the final confrontation with Karen herself in the courtroom. She appeared calm, almost eerily composed, her signature smirk still present. But as the trial progressed, the evidence we had gathered, videos, messages, witness statements, and the hidden arsenal of weapons painted a complete and undeniable picture of her obsession and premeditation. The courtroom was silent as the jury absorbed the depth of her planning, the network of allies, and the calculated nature of her attack on Lily. A twist no one expected came during testimony. One of Karen's former allies, a neighbor who had quietly observed her plans but later felt guilt, revealed explosive details. Karen had planned additional attacks on multiple families, targeting children who didn't conform to her twisted rules. This revelation sent shockwaves through the court, the audience gasping at the chilling extent of her obsession. It was beyond anything I had imagined, even after all the investigations. As the verdict was delivered, relief flooded through me. Karen was found guilty of multiple charges: attempted murder, stalking, harassment, and conspiracy. Her network was dismantled, and the community finally had justice. But even as she was led away, I knew the psychological impact of her actions, the fear, the trauma, the betrayal would linger. It would take time to rebuild, to reclaim the sense of security that had been shattered. That night at home with Lily, I reflected on the journey we had endured. From the shocking day of the shooting to the uncovering of her network, every moment had been a battle. But we had survived, we had fought back, and we had prevailed. I hugged Lily tightly, feeling the weight of everything we had overcome, and whispered, "You're safe now. Nothing will ever harm you again." She smiled, her trust and innocence untouched by the horrors she had faced, reminding me why every fight, every step, every risk had been worth it. The story of Karen serves as a powerful reminder. Danger can lurk where you least expect it. Evil can hide behind polite facades within trusted organizations, and even in neighborhoods that appear safe. But courage, vigilance, and the willingness to fight for those you love can expose darkness, dismantle it, and restore justice. To everyone watching this story today, remember, safety is never guaranteed, but awareness and action can prevent tragedy. Don't ignore suspicious behavior. Document it. Speak out. Protect your family with vigilance and love. Share the story to raise awareness. Comment below your thoughts, your own experiences, and the city you're watching from. Together, we can ensure that no child, no family faces what Lily and I endured. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories of courage, survival, and justice. Hit the notification bell, because these stories need to be told, and they need to be heard. And remember, love and vigilance are stronger than fear, and the truth will always find a way to shine. If the story moved you, shocked you, or made your heart race, don't let it end here. Comment below your city. I want to know where you're watching from and connect with all of you who care about protecting children and families. Share this video with friends and family to raise awareness about dangers that can hide behind ordinary faces and trusted organizations. The more people know, the safer our communities can become. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. More real-life stories like this, stories of courage, survival, and the fight for justice, are coming, and you won't want to miss a single one. Remember, love, vigilance, and action are stronger than fear. Protect your family, stay alert, and never underestimate the power of truth.